Thanks for joining us, Commissioner.
Thank you.
And for those who may not be aware, Commissioner Clyburn joined the FCC in 2009 and has since then pursued issues on behalf of communities that don't have the resources to hire lobbyists, basically.
Absolutely.
And of course, helped craft and pass the Open Internet Order, which has given us the net neutrality rules that we all enjoy. So thank you very much for that.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Yep. And if that's not worth a little applause, I don't know what is. But on that note, I'm going to ask the question that I think everybody here probably is wondering about. Is net neutrality doomed?
Net neutrality is doomed if we're silent. Now, I don't know what Thursday is going to launch. I'll be the first to tell you. And I'll be the first to tell you that I know I will vote in the opposite way that the other two will. But again, what we've seen is success. And what we know that if left unchecked, if there's not a referee on the field, that companies, your internet service providers, the big guys, will do with what they do best. They will answer to their shareholders, and they will ensure and double down when it comes to market share. But what we know, and what I got a chance to speak to some of the persons on the showroom floor, is that this is the most enabling platform, meaning broadband, the internet of our time. And this should not be a regulatory free zone. That we need to make sure that there's a referee, that there's somebody there calling the shots, saying whether, monitoring, saying whether or not this is okay or that is not. And if we don't have that, then shame on us. So it is dead if we're silent, regardless of what the vote is. I believe that if you continue to make the business case, which you've shown me here, that there's a definite business case for an open internet. Mm-hmm. And if we ensure that there are protections that consumers want and deserve, we're getting comments overwhelmingly saying that we want and deserve to be protected. But so I think that's important.
Yeah, certainly. But is there those comments are happening, but do they have an effect? Should we keep commenting? Are they being read? What can we do so that we don't just scream internally and run out of the room, which is what I want to do.
So the FCC has a process that begins officially on Thursday, where we will vote on a notice of proposed rulemaking, and we will then open the door up to you to comment. So even though you might have weighed in already, and according to the latest report, over 1 million people have weighed in, it's not officially a part of the record until that notice is published, is put forth, and that we affirm that it's open for you to do so.
Yeah, and that's
so you've got to weigh in. That is happening. Thursday is the vote for the notice of proposed rulemaking, and then you will have an opportunity a few days later when once it is all of the edits have been made and the like, that you have an opportunity to weigh in, and that is when it counts, or that's when it matters. Now again, I don't know what the vote's going to be in the months that follow, the final vote on an order, but that is where it matters, because the only way to defend something is to weigh in.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed several people, hundreds of thousands of people have weighed in with the exact same comment on the comment system. Some people out here may have read the news stories that there are hundreds of thousands of duplicate comments with same names, same everything. Is that something that the FCC is addressing, or is that something that we as the tech community can look into ourselves, or what?
I think it's a combination, but I believe we have the technical tools to get rid of some of the duplicates, to sift through some of the ones that are that should not count, because there might be a little something going on here that that we don't want. We want a process that is inclusive from the beginning to the end of the comment cycle, and we want to make sure that that things are properly counted.
And some people have already, actually in the tech community, started scraping the site and getting that data. Will that data be released, do you think, as an official package?
Well, one of the things that, and I love the name of this conference called Disrupt. One of the things that you allow us to do, and one of the reason why I love this process that we have at the FCC and in our nation is it's interactive. We have already heard from scientists and those who do those researchers that have basically said thus far, even looking through and scraping through the duplicates, over 96% of those who weighed in say we are for an open platform and open internet, we are pro net neutrality. And so I think collaboratively, because again, this is not a siloed ecosystem, it's very interactive.
Yeah.
I believe we have the opportunity for everybody to not only weigh in, but for us to get legitimate numbers and legitimate feel for what the country is thinking, and that's important. Not 3 to 5 people, at the FCC. While significant, the importance is what you think and what you feel, and you've got to weigh in when the comment cycle opens.
Right, and I'm sure we all will. And I want to go back in time a little bit. You helped propose and vote in the order in 2015, or 2014 and 2015. And it's been characterized recently as the FCC was dragged kicking and screaming into this regulatory framework that, of course, they've characterized as this Depression era, monopolizing rules or whatever. So does that tally with your recollection of the process, or was it a little different in your
I've been around the FCC for nearly 8 years, and I didn't feel like I was dragged, pushed, or pulled. I was given a mandate by the American people who said, we believe in this most enabling platform, but we know that protections are important. That we know that if left unchecked, there is an incentive for a large internet service provider to favor their associates.
Yes.
And we don't think that that should be the case. We know we have seen large and small providers disadvantage some of you in this room, or some of you, that are similar in this room. We don't think that should be the case. We think that you should be able to use a device of your choice. It is not harmful to the market, and as long as we are all abiding by the rules of law, that this should be an interactive participatory process. And we don't think that anyone should be favored. We don't think that a company who is responsible for the on-off ramps of the most, to me, in my lifetime, the most significant enabling platform that I have ever seen, that's bridging divides, that's lowering barriers to entry. We don't think 1, 2, or 3 providers should dictate what your experience should be, and we do not think this should be a regulatory-free zone, having those very same companies come up with voluntary standards, that we know that will only be voluntary in the boardrooms in their offices.
Thank you. Now, of course, people these days, the FCC and net neutrality have been in the news very frequently over the last couple of years. But the FCC does a lot more. You have a broader mandate to connect people, to connect the nation. It's described in the Telecommunications Act when it was put out there. What else do you do? I know that you have some personal things that you have pursued in your time at the FCC and before that are meant to enable communities like the ones I mentioned, people who can't get together and hire a high-priced lobbyist, but who still need something to benefit from the ecosystem that you just described. For instance, I know that inmate calling reform was one of your things. I don't know if you want to describe what that is.
So one of the things that I am so proud, the reason why I wanted to come up to DC, to leave my little comfort zone in South Carolina, where I sat on a commission and probably could have still been on that commission. Don't tell anybody, that's what I'm saying. Is that we have this principle called universal service. And what that recognizes is that we all benefit if everybody's connected. But we know that all communities are not created equal. There are communities richer, there are communities that are economically disadvantaged, there are communities that are rural, and there are communities that are more dense. Now, the more dense, economically well-heeled, we don't really have to worry about them much, because the money and the investment is going to flow there. But in those communities where there might be more corn stalks than people, and where there might be a median income that is below a certain average, where we do not want anybody to stay, that we're going to have incentives, a sort of a monthly dividend, so to speak, paid to companies to provide service to those communities. So we have this universal service fund. We have a high cost fund where you support through your contributions, money going to those areas to provide more affordable service. We have a Healthcare Connect fund that does the same thing with a smaller rural healthcare facilities. We have E-Rate, the Schools and Libraries Fund, which is doing the same thing, connecting schools and connecting learning centers like libraries to make sure that they have affordable access. And we have this program called Lifeline, which has been under attack for years, but is the FCC's only means-tested program that directly addresses the affordability gap, which we all know exists in this nation. So in December, what we did through reforms was make that program, Lifeline, not only subject or enabled to just provide voice subsidies for those who qualify, but now you can use that to connect to the internet. So on December 2nd, we said, wherever you consumer, wherever you want that dividend to flow, voice only, mobile voice, or fixed, a wireless or fixed broadband, that's where that money is going to flow. Yep. But I'm a little uneasy about that right now because there are some things that have happened since the new administration that has made it much harder for those businesses, for new businesses to take part. And these are the types of things that will enable individuals, to connect to the internet that I think are important. You mentioned one other thing about something I've been working on for years, and that is one of the most sad, egregious, and heartless things that I have seen in my 18 years as a regulator, and that's the price inmates and their families pay to keep in touch. Now, the Communications Act in Section 254B, subject to check, as you lawyers like to say, it mandates that we provide just, reasonable, and fair rates, and that we are, in essence, the closer of the divides when it comes to advanced services and other voice services. That seems to be an exception to the rule when it comes to that particular class of customers in terms of the calls, inmate calling, calls, those made to and from. But what I want to remind the audience is a couple of things. There is no carve-out saying that everybody deserves just, reasonable, and fair rates except for inmates and their family. And I think about when I was speaking to some of the vendors outside, that technology is incredible. What you're doing is so disruptive, positively disruptive and enabling. But one of the things, an element that I've seen lately in the inmate calling regime is something called video visitation, where they have actually used technology to disenable and further disadvantage communications. And what that means is no matter where you live, like, say you and I, say if you wanted to keep in touch with a loved one that's 600, 700 miles away, then video visitation is a wonderful, phenomenal thing that will allow us to keep
video calling has become practically a standard. We can do it for free. We can do it on all our phones.
But what is happening in a number of jurisdictions is you can live 10 miles away and you cannot visit your loved one in person. They're using video visitation to basically close down the interaction with families, and they're still charging these people. And so what I'm saying is, number one, the rates there are unjust and unreasonable. You can pay $25 for a 15-minute call, but on top of that, you can still live close to someone and still not see them and still pay a high price. This is disrupting families and lives, and this is disrupting your business model because you increasingly are having people who cannot afford to provide or buy your services or take advantage of what's going on outside because they're busy paying $25, if they're lucky sometimes, $25 for a call. They don't have expendable or disposable income to take advantage of what your services, your businesses.
Yeah, and this is what exactly the kind of example of what you were talking about. When a company has the opportunity to target a demographic or to charge more for something that ought not to be charged for at all, for instance, but then there's no rule preventing it, they're going to do it, right? It's kind of like the natural, it's like their predatory instinct. They automatically go for the prey. And
this is a population that has no voice, that a lot of people, they have no sympathy over, and they're vulnerable. And people, and for the 10 years, the FCC even ignored them. And so to really sit on our regulatory bums and not do anything about something that we have the capacity to do, and leave it to the states and local authorities. And the local authorities, by the way, those jails, they're profiting too, because they're getting commissions or kickbacks from these companies. It is not going to solve it by itself if the FCC does not get involved.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the future holds when it comes to that. I'm ashamed to say.
Well, and that's partly because you are coming to the end of your term as a commissioner. What does that, I mean, first of all, we need you. Where are you going? Why are you leaving?
So regardless of what my title is, I'm not going far. I commit to you. You talk about something and being a part of my DNA. I'm spitting. You know, I am really, and I don't know how I'm going to be able to eat and provide for myself and do this, but I would not be able to close my eyes when it's time for me to go to glory if I didn't do everything that I could to close these gaps, to address these issues that will not be solved unless there's a voice out there. And that's why, to your first question, is so important. You cannot afford to be silent no matter what the vote is, no matter what the order says, because there's always a court, and the best court is the court of public opinion, that if you weigh in and say, this is bad business, this is, you know, bad policy, before you transition, we will have an open, robust process with the balance needed to make regulatory sense. I promise you, if I can't promise you anything, can't promise you on Thursday, can't promise you a vote, but I can promise you before it all ends, we're going to have an open, participatory, inclusive, fair, open internet regulatory platform that you will be proud of. I promise you that.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it. So what's next for you, though? I mean, are you gonna?
I try to avoid, you know, kind of.
Nice try.
I keep telling people
we don't do that here.
I'm a PK. I'm a politician's kid. So we have a tendency to weave involved.
We've experienced that before on stage today. In fact, I've seen
on stage today. So I'm going to be speaking for those women and girls who have few options. I'm going to be about research and hopefully crafting policy, being an influencer in terms of crafting policy, and hopefully making a business model that will look at those rural communities where the infrastructure does not organically flow. Because again, this is the infrastructure of now. It is like when we were talking 20 and 30 years about clean, potable water. Businesses are not going to go to places where there is not the technological infrastructure to flow, and that keeps poor communities and disadvantaged, and rural communities at a disadvantage. I want to be, and will continue to be, about bridging those divides, and that is what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing. Good.
And are you done with the official governmental capacity, or?
Well, you know, you have to. There's a process here, and some of it I don't have too much, voice in. But I promise you this: however long I will be there, I will continue to be your voice, speaking up for open platforms, speaking up for parity, speaking up for affordability, because all of those things help the ecosystem. If you build it, and I can't afford to come, then both of us are frustrated. And so that is what I think, that's the kind of regulator I believe you want. Am I right? You want a regulator that looks at the entire ecosystem and says if it's not affordable, it's not accessible, and if it's not open, and you're disadvantaged because a company is basically calling the balls and calling the strikes, then we have not done right by you.
And when you take off, do you know who's going to take your place? Got any ideas?
I have no idea, but if anybody has any suggestions,
There's probably a process for that,
I know,
too.
There's a process for that. But you want you want a commission that is reflective of the American experience, that is diverse, that is engaged. You do not want 5 people up there singing from the same hymnal. I'm from the South, so we do a lot of biblical and hymnal references. And so you want people that reflect your point of view, because when you have that type of inclusion and diversity, you get better policy, because all of us need a check and balance on occasion. Those of you in business, if you have everybody that thinks the way you do, you won't be in business for long. You got to have people in there that will be disruptive internally in order for you to build a better product. And I think that same approach needs to be by way of, in terms of your regulatory authority, your body. You need regulators that are internally disruptive, that are taking some of the best qualities and characteristics that we see on the showroom floor and bring that into regulation. You need that, and we need that.
Absolutely. And is there anywhere, we're pretty much out of time here, but if you'd like to, are there any resources that people can keep up with what you're doing, what the FCC is doing, and how to keep informed on this process?
Number one, Thursday is the launch. And when we say that that item is scrubbed and published, you need to weigh in if you care about a free and open internet. Please follow me through, I'm just on Twitter, I'm kind of old school, so just on Twitter. But please, follow what we do. It is definitely integrally connected to what you do. You cannot afford to be a passive bystander when it comes to one of the most significant regulatory agencies in the world. And so if you don't interact, if you're not engaged, then shame on you, because you will have others dictating what you do. You will be less than successful. And so you have got to keep up with what we do each and every day. And you have to keep an eye on this open internet, and do not get discouraged.
Well, good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you.